Hello, people of the interwebs. Stefan Fast here at NAMM 2020 with my very own ambient hero, Andy Othling. And Andy, since you're here, I just felt like I should pick your brain from all the ambient magical knowledge you may have. Because I get a lot of questions on my channel about how I approach ambient playing, but the truth is that a lot of that was actually inspired by a bunch of your early videos you did, because you had this very, very sweet ambient tutorial sessions on YouTube. And you've been doing this for way longer than I have. So I just wanted to pick your brain a bit on how you approach, for instance, reverb use, chord voicings, and such. So, I will get there. Hit you with my best ambient shot. At the base of a nice ambient sound, you need some reverb.
That's true.
So how do you approach building your core reverb tone?
So, I actually explained this a little bit in the new Pedal Crush book, because I have a little section in there.
Plug it?
Pedal Crush, check it out. The book, buy it.
I'm in it too.
We're both in it. No, I feel like my reverb usage falls into two categories. Basically, one reverb happening at the end of everything, and reverb happening at the beginning of everything. Yeah. And primarily for me, I mean, the simplest way to say it is that the reverb at the end is the big spacey one to wash everything out and to make a big stereo thing, right? So here at NAMM, I'm using the new Chase Bliss, the CXM, yeah,
1978.
Yeah, that they just announced this year. So that's kind of doing the big wide modulated reverb tail. So that's obviously we all need that in our lives, right?
Yeah.
So
if we were to get a bit more nerdy about that,
yeah, let's do it.
do you approach it?
Yeah,
What do you think about reverb?
Classic Joel.
Do you approach it from extremely long decay, low mix, or high mix, lower decay, or do you have you found your own magical recipe there?
Well, unfortunately, as with many answers to questions like these, the answer is it depends. So, but really what it depends on is how much time-based stuff is happening before that, because I mean, as we all know, this stuff can get really messy and really muddy very quickly. And so, like, if I'm sending a real dark, like low, if I'm doing a dark kind of low signal thing, not low signal, but like low octave or something, I might want that last reverb to be a very bright one to kind of have its own space. Or if I'm doing a very bright, like if I'm still picking my guitar and I'm doing like real high octave stuff from the POG or octave thing or whatever, I might want that reverb to be darker. And same with if I've got a bunch of delays and my other reverb on, that it's adding a big tail already, like I may not want this one to be massive, right? I may just want the stereo widening effect of it and not have a super long decay. So it's all about the cumulative effect for me. And you know, since we're kind of in a linear, it's just pedal 1, pedal 2, it's a line of pedals, your later pedals are multiplying your time-based effects, exponentially by the end, right? Because you're delaying our signal that's already been delayed multiple times. So that adds up quickly. So for me, it's a lot about taking stock of the full picture and being like, what's too much? I mean, we're trying to bump up against too much and then come back just a little bit, right? Yeah. At least I am. So that's what the reverb at the end is doing. It's just like we're spicing up what's happened. We're making it bigger, prettier, whatever. In terms of reverb early, I'm using a Dark Star for this now, but I like having it right after the octave stuff and before any overdrive, because and that reverb is primarily it's always full mix, full wet. So that's another way, because I've not been using a volume pedal for a while. I've got other ways to remove attack from my guitar that I find more interesting at this point, but that early chain reverb being one of them. So, I got it full mix, and I can change the reverb time, and you're picking along, right? But it's just one long sustained pad, and so that'll work well with the reverb at the end too, because I'm completely transforming my signal with the early chain reverb, and then the later chain is spreading it out and doing all that fun stuff. So that's reverb in a nutshell for me. But like just the later chain reverb here. So we've got a pretty long tail going on that. It's just a nice. Oh, we're doing some octave stuff with the mood. Let me turn that off. So that's adding to my signal. The guitar is still coming through, but with this early reverb, I like to just completely wash it out, so it's just removing all attack, just giving me just like a pad. So all of this happening right now is two reverbs. One completely changing my sound, and then one just spacing it out. So that's kind of it for that.
Awesome. A thing I've noticed, which is pretty new to me and mind-blowing, is the way that you like to integrate filters in your chain in order to sort of brighten or soften the sound. Could you explain that a bit?
Yeah. So that's something kind of new to me too, and my joke this NAMM is like, I'm just resigning myself that I'm basically a synth player at this point. I mean, synth guys are all about the filter and whatnot, So yeah, I'm actually using filtering two places on my board right now. So I've got this signal blender, which I'm using to kind of separate out my looping devices. So I have more separate control over them, both mix and EQ wise. So right after my mood pedal, I've got this Generation Loss, that special edition Chase Bliss Audio Cooper collab. Obviously very cool, wow and flutter vinyl type effects, but I like it to be able to filter the mood. And the way I have it set up on my board, the Gen Loss is only affecting mood, so I can filter that distinct from everything else. Now, after all my loops are summed together with the signal blender, I go into the Evil filter, which I can do band pass, high pass, low pass on my entire signal. And it's, you can get wild, you can do some subtle just, okay, my signal's too bright, let's darken it a little bit. Or you can do some real high resonance bandpass sweeps and just like, slowly find where's the interesting frequencies in this sound currently, let's bring them out, or, just kind of sweep stuff around and give some interesting movement. So that's kind of new to me too. I've had a lot of conversations about filters this NAMM, and it seems like a lot of filter effects are envelope based, which is not that interesting to me at all. So a filter that's purely laid out in a synth sense, like you got a filter knob, you got a resonance, and you sweep it how you want, that just makes more sense to me. So I'm just a synth guy. I'm a synth guy now.
I'm the same, but I'm also thinking, one thing I've also noticed is if you're stacking a lot of reverb and delays, it can also create this accumulative resonance at times, also combined with bright pickups. So I imagine, also the Evil filter or the Generation Loss will be able to remove some of that.
Right. And that's a thing I'm very cognizant of. Like these days I'm seeing my pedal board almost more similar to the way I see like a channel in like mixing a song. Like you've got this layout of plugins or effects or whatever, and you're just changing. So I'm seeing it in a very linear way that way. I'm like, okay, we got some overdrive, we got some color here, but at the end, I want complete EQ control over what's happening, because I don't know, you get spoiled by working in Logic. You have so much control over it. Like I want to do this with my hands on my pedal board. So that's. And then to your point, like about stacking stuff, I'm very cognizant of, okay, early in my chain, is my dark star providing a dark or a bright signal? And so after that effect, I'm very cognizant of okay, I want to do the opposite of that somewhere else. Because like I was saying earlier, if you just start if you're just adding on in the same frequency, that's going to get muddy and hard to do anything with. So I'm very cognizant of that overall.
Do you want to give like a quick example of how you use the filters, for instance?
To show you the first, I just froze something in mood, which is in my signal blender. Make it a little more prominent there. So it's a nice drone thing, but now I'll turn this gen loss on, so it gets warbly, right? But then I have like low pass control over it, so I can soften that if needed. So that's just applying to mood. And so obviously I can play on top of this and I'm still full. And I've got the dark star on, so I'll turn it off, just play regular. Let me put a loop into Blooper real quick and I'll show you the additive effects going on here. We've got a loop going in Blooper and mood right now. Mood is being filtered by gen loss, but then I can use this evil filter to roll off everything from the entire signal. That's just a low pass filter that I'm sweeping, and then I can switch to band pass. And we can just sort of focus on different areas of the signal, right? And the cool thing too is that I still have a stereo delay and reverb after this filter, so you know I could turn up the decay on this reverb, then filter it out to nothing, and we're just holding on this kind of droney thing. Turn it down, bring it back up. So you can there's different ways to like grab a sound, freeze it for a little bit. There's just a lot of compositional stuff you can do with a setup like this. That's kind of the basics.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that the evil filter has that slight resonance, or you can control the resonance of it, it adds a nice synthy effect as well as when you move the filter.
Yeah, and I feel like guitar players could really benefit a lot from the way synth players use filters. Because it doesn't make sense a lot, because at least in my brain I have to see like these knobs in my head. It's translated to like a literal EQ curve. Like I'm seeing the frequency, and then the resonance I'm seeing like I'm physically seeing the bump and seeing it move around. So I understand it could be a little weird to get into at first. Like normally you just want like treble, mid, bass control, but the frequency resonance way of doing filtering is, I think, more creative and fun. So
bringing it all back to the thing you said of looking at your pedal board as somewhat of a DAW,
yeah.
The signal blender kind of fits perfectly into that mythology. Because with that you have the old blood noise signal blender, you have the mood and generation loss in one, and then the blooper in another. Can you explain how you use that?
Yeah. So, I've got 3 loopers on the board here, and the options to freeze my signal at points even before that. So there could be literally 5 layers of sounds happening just right here. And in a purely linear pedal board setup, it's just, pedal 1 into 2 into 3 into 4. You have to work backwards. Like you're stuck. You've got to start, your last looper has to be the first one you start with. Otherwise you get this compounding effect. If you loop on the first looper in my chain and then I try to do something later on, that first loop is getting into that last loop. You can't avoid that. But with the signal blender, and you may want this, you may not, but the things in the loops cannot interact with each other. So that might seem like a limitation, and it might seem like a bummer that blooper and mood cannot interact on my pedal board, but it gives me far more control over the different parts of my signal, as opposed to that linear part before. It's just you're at the mercy of how you've worked backwards. But with this, Mood and Blooper can be doing their things. I can be playing on top of it and send my signal to either one individually to do something and not have to worry about, okay, well, I've already sent to Mood. I only have Blooper to work with now because it's before it in the chain. Hope that makes sense. It's just like, so all I'm saying is that I'm splitting a certain subset of my pedals out in parallel because there's a lot of power in not being linear. So
the way I kind of see it, also returning to seeing it as a DAW, is where when you're recording in a DAW and you're layering and you're layering and you're layering, you often want sounds or samples to pop in and out of the mix at certain times or random times or whatever. And as I see it, this allows you to fade in and out textures and loops as you please.
And that's the better way of saying what I've been trying to say. It's just I have more granular control over more parts of my signal. That's really all it is. So, I mean, I've got my Capistan before my signal blender, so if I've got a loop going there and I've got stuff going on in Mood and Blooper, I essentially have 3 layers of things that I have a mix control over in one spot on my pedal board. So, like I keep mentioning the compositional aspect of this, like just with the 3 knobs on Signal Blender, I can compose, being like I can add movement to my sound, I can bring stuff in and out, and like I've got these expression sliders too from Old Blood Noise that one of them is controlling the clock speed on my mood, so I can fade the mood signal out, change the clock signal, bring it back in at a different speed and see what that sounds like. I won't know. Sometimes it's a surprise. Like I don't know what's gonna come back when I fade this in. So you can have some happy accidents and stuff like that. But like I said, just a lot of hands-on. I'm liking using my hands more than my feet. So I'm kind of designing this that way.
To my final question, and one of the most important questions probably, because with this board you have a ton of sound going on, running, fading in and out constantly. How do you approach note choices, chord voicings and stuff like that? Because at the hang we were at yesterday where you jammed with Mason Stoops, I noticed that you played very, very few notes actually, and basically no chords, and you made it sound like a trillion instruments going on at the same time. Could you explain your approach to this?
Well, it's the same concepts, basically, as I was saying about kind of the EQ overall, like being cognizant of where stuff fits in EQ-wise. It's the same thing musically, right? Like someone like Mason, I told him before we did that, I was like, I'm following you. And I told other people, I was like, I really enjoy fitting in with something that's already going on and making that good. Like that, adding and not subtracting from something. And if you take that mentality and include it with, because with this board, I can take one note and turn it into, I don't know how many different, you can add 5 different octave layers of it and do other things with loops. So it's, even though I'm playing one note a lot, it's just, again, the cumulative effect of this whole thing makes it such that you've got to be cognizant of what's going on musically, EQ-wise, and playing accordingly, because like there were moments last night where it just like, I got something going and my focus is now not on the guitar. I don't need to add anything else to this. I'm just tweaking it. And so, I don't know, like for me, I'm still learning to hold back. Like, that's been the most fun part is like, it is. And people, I don't really care what people say, whether what we're doing is hard or not, but I think the hardest part is the listening. It is the reacting to what is happening both on my pedal board and with whatever else is going on. So with everything, it's still a musical component. Like, what do we need here? What do we not need here? And And also with this hands-on approach, it's just like, yeah, it's fun to sit here and tweak and mix and sweep and whatever, but sometimes you just got to sit and let the thing be for a second, you know? So slowing down, listening, being aware, communicating, non-verbally.
Great life philosophy right there.
Hope that answers the question. I bet, yeah, but in terms of note choices, it's I like, and I believe I have a video like this in the series in chord voicings, but I really like, if I'm doing a chord, I like getting rid of the 5. Like, who cares about the 5? Like, you got the root note and you got the 3. Like, the 3 determines whether you're major or minor, determines the mood of kind of what's going on. Yeah, I tend to stick to 2, if I'm doing a chord, 2 notes. So I will do a 1 and 5 if it's like a big low swell. But I do just like a 1 and a 3 in terms of the intervals, because yeah. So I'll do it with a big swell so you can see how it. So this is my big swell setting on the POG. So I'll do just a 1 and a 5 on the C, right? So I'm playing 2 notes, but it's adding 3 octaves of those 2 notes. So that's 6 notes going on. So I don't need more than that going on. And then, if I wanted to do an actual chord like an E minor, I'll just do the 1 and the 3. Like if I did the full chord, I just feel like that's not leaving room for more cool stuff to happen. So you have to think ahead too. It's like, I could do this big, massive swell that takes over the entire frequency, but then where do you go? So again, it's just all about fitting in with what's happening. Using as little as possible. That's the answer.
That is exactly the answer. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this, Andy. I learned a lot. Thank you.
Let's all be more like synth players in 2020. Yes. We're going synth in 2020.